What's good, everybody? It's Cortland here. You call me Cook for short, as always, and we're checking in with you guys from the underground. I hope you got a chance to check out my last video where I discussed briefly some of my thoughts on why I actually think nerds are actually on the way up in society in the years coming. So if you didn't get a chance to check that out, please hit that video up. Share your thoughts on that in the comments below. But let's get back to today's topic because this question might be a doozy. Um, but it's a real question, right? Not a comfortable one, um, maybe not a viral one, but it is a necessary question to ask. So, why does it sometimes feel like the black community can't disagree with itself without imploding? I'm gonna give y'all some time for that one because I know that's we're about to ruffle some feathers with the rest of this video. And before I go further, let me be clear and let me do all the prefacing. I am a black man. I'm speaking about the black community, but I love the black community. I love being a black man. And I'm giving this message more so because I care, right? I'm not here to attack us. I'm not really here to bash. Just take this more of just like, we checking vitals every now and again. Like, you're supposed to get a physical once a year. Some of us don't do that. I'm guilty of not doing that. But that's what this is, really, just a vital check, right? So, you can't really say you love a thing and you're actively or passively participating in its decline. So, um, if this conversation makes you uncomfortable, that is actually what we want to happen because we can't have growth without being uncomfortable at this point. So, and to really have this discussion, um, we're talking about how groupthink as a concept, what it is, why it exists, and how it's actually quietly holding back the black community. So let's get into that. So we'll start out with what the definition of groupthink is. Not my definition, what the actual definition of groupthink is, because we can't go off my opinion or your opinion about something that is a fact-based conversation like we're trying to have today. So the definition of groupthink is this: the desire for unity becomes more important than the pursuit of truth. I'm gonna say that again. Desire for unity becomes more important than the pursuit of truth. So, in simple terms, it's when people prioritize agreeing over accuracy, right? And this shows up in a couple of different ways, but some of the simple, identifiable ways that this happens is, you know, just repeating the same talking points. We see that all the time. Punishing dissent, right? And just difference, right? Treating disagreement as some form of betrayal, even, or disloyalty, and prioritizing optics over outcomes. Now, before we go further in this conversation, I know there will be people watching this video like, oh, this is in every community. Yeah, it is. It is in every community. But I told you in the beginning of this video, we're not talking about every community. We're talking about the black community, our community, my community. And so, tying it specifically to the black community, this concept of groupthink is actually more detrimental to us than maybe others currently. Um, and the conversation is a little bit different because for us, groupthink um, started out as a survival strategy for black people. So, um, what do I mean by that, right? And to really understand why groupthink exists in the black community, you've got to really understand where it comes from. Because at one point it really kept us alive. So this was during slavery, Jim Crow, segregation times, right? Independent thought expressed publicly really wasn't a brave thing to do. It's actually quite dangerous. A real example of that is the Stono Rebellion of 1739 in South Carolina. This was actually the largest slave uprising in colonial American history, and after it was suppressed by the colonizers, obviously the response to the slaves, our ancestors, was very brutal. Right, laws got tighter, surveillance increased, collective punishment became the norm. So if one person was suspected of resisting, everybody paid the price. So enslaved black people, they adapted, right? And so what did that look like? Just unspoken rules, right? So begin to develop. So you don't want to talk too much, you don't want to stand out, and you don't want to contradict each other, especially in front of the white folks. And that's really what groupthink is, right? But in this context, it's actually being used as a defense mechanism. It's being used for camouflage, right? Entire communities learned to move on a script, right? To stick to the code. Public conformity, private coordination, silence wasn't weakness, it was actually strategy. And so, other examples of that, right? The Underground Railroad, right? The only way that worked was because people knew to keep their mouths quiet. People knew to not ask questions. Just imagine right now if we had the Underground Railroad in 2025, that shit would be done. It will be found out about after about a week because so many people with this complexion can't keep their mouth shut. They just got to be heard. I'm sorry. I got went off script a little bit, but the truth is in statement, right? And so other examples, right? Like hush harbor churches, right? Only survived because everyone agreed to stay on code. One person breaking rank meant families, communities would get wiped out, get sold, get killed. So unity over individuality, it made sense, right? Conformity was survivable, yes. But here's the issue with that. And this is where the glitch happens. Um, the same mindset that protected us when the threat was imminent and external, right? It doesn't really work when the threat now is coming from within. And the threat is stagnation collectively. Um, Groupthink saved black folk in 1739. But in 2025, we can't question ourselves, right? Without some form of attack from within ourselves, to ourselves, and that's costing us progress. So, how is groupthink showing up today in our community? I'll give you guys two examples. I know there are several, but just for the sake of the video, because I'm probably already pissing people off and we're approaching 10 minutes on this video, I'm gonna give you two. Number one, fear of internal criticism. What does that look like? What does that sound like? I'm pretty sure y'all know, but humor me and I'll humor you. In many spaces, internal critique isn't treated as care, right? It's actually treated as betrayal. I said this a little bit earlier in the video in a couple different words, but same thought, right? So this presents itself when we bring up issues in the black community that deal with education, crime, financial habits, family and community structures, right? The conversation immediately shifts from how do we fix any issues in these areas to why are we blaming black people? Why are we blaming us? It's the colonizers. It's all these people. that become the issue, or all these excusatory statements that get said that instantly shut down the conversation that needs to happen in order for us to progress towards solutions. And point number two is just simply identity over evidence. And what does that mean? What does that sound like? That's just a cool little phrase you made up. Well, okay. We'll expand it in using layman's terms, as they say. This is simply when data challenges popular narrative and the data gets rejected. Not because it's wrong, but because it just feels wrong, and it makes us not feel good about ourselves to face the truth. Somewhere along the way, we started prioritizing how information, again, makes us feel over whether it will help us improve as a people. And when emotions dictate truth, truth won't last. Anything we build off of those truths won't last. So let's get a little bit more specific about how this is presenting itself in real time. According to data from the NAEP, which is the National Assessment of Educational Progress, Black students score lower on average in reading and math compared to national averages. Right. So we can have all kind of conversations about that, justifications, rationalities, impartations to that, but that's a fact. That's a statistic. Um, yes, we have um, a smaller amount of the population and nationally compared to maybe other races, but even still, let's just let's just hold on for a second. Let's just hold on for a second, um, and just listen to it. Black students score lower on average in reading and math compared to national averages. If anything, let's just say those numbers, the information was skewed and jaded. Just the fact that we're having issue in the subjects of reading and math alone, we should probably at least listen and figure out, you know, accept it, right? Because those are two subjects that we need to be better at collectively so that our people can be better, right? And it's not an insult, right? It's a measurement, but we'll perceive it as an insult. And like, take this topic, right? Into a room full of black people, and I'll wager at least a fourth of them will shift the narrative from discussing results to arguing for sympathy and excusability, right? Conversation shifts from how do we improve outcomes to this is why we need diversity, equity, and inclusion. Like, how do we already have a solution and we haven't even acknowledged the problem? Uh, the data became the enemy that fast, right? Instead of asking questions like, are our schools underfunded? Yes, we know they are. Um, are we developing ways within the community to get that funding? Are we asking those questions? Are we asking questions like, are we discouraging academic excellence culturally? Are we looking at the examples we have our children looking at and asking honestly, do these people look like um, beacons of academia that we can aspire to be? Maybe, maybe not. Not for me to say. I don't know. I'm nobody. Right. And then just even more so, again, because these are kids, are we equipping the parents of these children that are suffering and struggling with the right tools? I don't know. We argue about who's allowed to talk about it, and most people, I think this extends beyond the black community, right? But generally, most people they like to just be the person to identify the problem, right? And get credit for identifying the problem. They still expect somebody else to fix it. And while we argue over who's fixing the problem or who sourced the problem keeps growing. Groupthink turns solvable problems into permanent ones. And another just uncomfortable example of this in our community is just in the subject of violence and community silence about violence, any types of violence, but in particular this one. According to the CDC mortality data, young black men are disproportionately affected by gun violence, often by the hands of other young black men. Again, that is statistically true. Um, and we can, say maybe the data is fragmented or impartial or blase blase, but yet this angle is often avoided. And why? Why? Because acknowledging it feels like we're airing dirty laundry, right? Um, Acknowledging it feels like snitches get stitches, right? But here's how my nerd brain works about this particular subject. If I were trying to destroy a community, I wouldn't do it from outside. I just poison the well. Poison the well, and they gone from within, right? And when violence is normalized, excused, or reduced to slogans like Black Lives Matter, you can acknowledge systematic issues and still demand internal accountability. Because to say Black Lives Matter and you are demanding another ethnic group, another social group, another financial group, another just group outside of the black community to see you as a human, but we don't acknowledge the inhumane actions and decisions and thought practices and thought processes that are within our community, we just look stupid. We just look stupid. And so, simple example of this in real time that we all probably know every day could relate to is anyone with an Apple device, right? iPhone, iPad, iPod for those back in the day that might still have one, MacBook Pro, all that shit. We have these devices and we know periodically, once a couple of weeks, maybe once a couple of months, at whatever frequency, we expect Apple to shoot us an update to the iOS, right? Or just OS, depending on what device you're on. And this typically comes with updates and changes to various features and workflows, right? Icons might change and look different. The textures of shit might change and be different. And we as users, we then have to refamiliarize ourselves and change, right? Adapt, improve ourselves and ability to still use the device effectively. So if we can understand this concept of needing to improve to stay current with the times, right, and all that kind of jazz, why can't we do it on the MacBook, right? Now there are actually studies today that are showing that younger Black Americans are actually choosing to identify with more things that are outside of the traditional Black community um, values, right? Um, and that could be for so many different reasons, both good and bad. But aligning that to this topic in particular, and being, you know, someone that considers myself um, a nerd first and a black man second, I kind of get why, you know, some of us black people want to identify with something else, because I mean, we're not really given much option if we choose to stay in the black community and follow all those, you know, social norms. I won't maybe say um, traditional things that are within the black community, because I guess I'll change that a little bit. You know, yeah, no, I think outside of maybe some of those traditional things, traditional positive things that have been a benefit to the black community, um, I understand why a lot of younger generation black people are wanting to latch on to things outside of the black community traditionally, because to be black now in America, it's such a thin like room. You don't really have much room to be anything, really be anything else. Like, it's so limiting, kind of sort of, to be just black. And this is often why I say I'm a nerd first and a black man second. Um, why does that matter, you might ask? Because in many black spaces that I will venture into, um, probably some of you out there can relate to this. Um, the moment you start prioritizing thinking, analysis, over curiosity and, you know, vibe, um, and conformity, like you get treated like an outsider. You're no longer black anymore. You're one of those. And it's not really because of how you look, more so of how you think, right? Um, and like, we all know this happens. We all have experienced it. I won't say we all have experienced it, but we all know it happens in the black community, and we know it happens much more than it should. And again, this should concern us, because if we really define our blackness primarily on surface level traits instead of shared values, we actually limit our collective potential. And we end up just looking unified without actually being unified. And, you know, what's the point of that, right? But we can actually see examples of this pretty much everywhere in the world today, you know, from a macro, micro perspective. But one of the biggest places that we can see that is actually on social media. And so this isn't like a rag social media thing and blame everything on every little issue or war that's happened since social media on the advent of social media. But it definitely is part of the problem, right? And so again, social media didn't create groupthink, so that's not what I'm saying. It just monetized it, right? Online, a lot of people aren't really actually afraid of being wrong, and we see a lot of those back and forth dialogues and examples where two or maybe more parties are wrong about a subject. Kind of cool to see, but we're just like, ugh. Um, they're really more so just afraid of being alone on the timeline, like being independent in a thought or opinion. Um, and groupthink online, it doesn't look like everyone agreeing, though. What it looks like is actually people are pretending to agree with you because they understand the cost of disagreement being social exile. And so, you know, most social media platforms today like the Twitters, the Instagrams, those main ones really, they reward like examples of what we'll call pseudo confidence. They reward outrage, right? We see that when we scroll down our timeline and we just constantly get bombarded by just negative things and pessimistic thoughts and just the pettiest stories, the stuff that doesn't matter really. And it also rewards simplicity over substance. Like example, um, there was a time where we could only put out like what 15-second videos, right, on some earlier forms of social media platforms. Um, and now we have like a couple of minutes here or there. Like most of the content that we are engaging all day, every day, because we have social media access on any device now, we're limiting our attention span to just seconds or minutes at a time. And if you only can focus for seconds or minutes at a time, you can't really focus. And so nuance doesn't really trend on social media. And once a narrative goes viral, questioning that is like social suicide, right? Groupthink has gone digital. And so, what does it cost us to really operate this way? What are we losing as a people? I'll tell you. Thank you for asking, even though you didn't, but thank you for asking. We lose independent thinkers. We lose innovators in exchange for being censored, right? Bad leadership, examples that get to avoid and dodge accountability, and emotional unity replacing structural progress. The last one is definitely interesting, and the worst of all, right? We start confusing agreement with advancement. And simply put, feeling aligned isn't the same as moving forward. So, what actually breaks the cycle of this, right? And this is the information y'all don't really care about, but we're going to say it anyways because we're at this point in the video. We might as well. And the solution is very simple, but it's probably the opposite of what everybody expects us to do, or wants to do, rather. And it's just simply put, the solution will never be division. The solution is maturity. The solution is understanding that critique isn't really betrayal. It is improvement. It's enhancement. It's refinement even. Data isn't disrespectful. It's finite, right? And the good thing about data, because again, I'm a sales analyst by day, and so I look at data. I look at sales information. I look at customer information. I look at all that kind of stuff, and we check data in periods of time, right? And so if I'm looking at data from, if I want to make improvements and modifications in my present and my future, I have to look at things from the past. And if I look at those things from the past, those things are finite, right? They've already happened. I can't change that. That's what data is. And I'm able to look at those things constructively, pick out the good, leave the bad, assess, and progress. Right? That's what breaks the cycle of being bound to the holds of groupthink as a people, right? And a strong community can both argue and build. You know, I think what's hurting us now as Black people is we're arguing about lesser topics. We're not arguing about how do we build. And I think maybe even a lot of us would stand to maybe have more discussions, even if they were heated or if they were more around the subject of how do we build it? Let's fix it. I think, yeah, we might argue, we might, fuss, but we might talk about that. That might be a good conversation, right? Um, Unity without thought is a cage, and unity with truth is actually power, right? So, thank you for listening to me ramble and rant. And if this discussion, if these talking points made you uncomfortable at any point, good. I did my job. I wanted to. Um, if this made you angry, ask yourself why an idea, not an insult, triggered you to respond negatively. If it made you think, then this episode did its actual intended number one job. Um, so, um, add some comments to this. Let's have a discussion. Let's have debate. If you enjoyed it, share this with somebody you know. Again, this is Ghost Town. Underground. Again, it's home for the internet refugees. In support, we're going back underground.